Natasha, and this is crazy. The phone ring, right? My mother answers the telephone because the phone rings and she says, hello? Who? And she looks at us and says, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Yes, that Michael Jackson of the Jackson Five, who we've been emulating for a long time, soon to be king of pop, is on the phone. She looks at the brother below me, child number four, and says, he wants to talk to you. So my brother runs over to the phone. Hello? Uh huh. Okay. And hangs up the phone.
Keeper, thank you so much for joining us. I am very intrigued by your story. I've read a little bit about what it is that you do, so I'm going to dig in and really pick your brain. So
Okay.
I look forward to this conversation. So if you could just give us a little bit of background about what happened as to what led you to where you are here, and then we'll take it from there.
Absolutely, Natasha. Thank you for having me. It is an honor to be here. Um, so, like you said, let's just jump into it. Let me start out by just asking a question. Have you or any of your audience ever wondered what goes through the mind of a brother once he learns their sister has been sexually abused, primarily in the home by their parents? I'm the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges that brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused. It is book one of a three-book series that I'm writing, from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. I'm writing hopefulness now, which takes you from the journey of helplessness and trying to find hope. Now, helplessness is very truthful, and we get down to what is really going on in that situation. Through my family's experience, we not only explore what happens, but we actually answer the question. So let's get into it. In 1971, my family, we were incredibly poor, very, very, very poor. Lived in Los Angeles. In fact, I pretty much still live in Los Angeles now. South Central LA, home of the gang banging and all of this, from the Crips to the Bloods and all this. These are people that I grew up around. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. I lived in 21 different places before I moved out. I was homeless three times. So I know the life of not having any food and not having any money and going into the streets to look for bottles to turn in to get some cash, to get a pound of ground beef or simply a bag of rice. I know that life. That was me growing up. In 1971, my mother, who was an absolutely fabulous singer, decided to start singing with her brother and sister. And as great as they were, they could not make money to still help us pay a $90 a month rent. 1971 is also the year Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, they are blowing up. They're everywhere. All across the radio airways, you heard ABC, Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. I mean, it was everywhere. They were these superstars. And so, because my mother and my aunt and uncle were singing, my mother would hear us singing around the house. I come from a family of 10. At this time, my stepfather, my mother, four boys, four girls. I am the second oldest of the eight kids. My mother had all eight of her kids by the time she was 24. And so the challenges of trying to feed eight kids and house eight kids and clothe eight kids was monumental for her. So she's hearing us singing around the house. And as I said, she and my aunt and uncle weren't making enough money. And she got the idea of maybe the kids want to sing. So one day she asked us, do you guys want to sing? We're like, yeah, because we're singing the Jackson 5 stuff, right? And so because we say yes, the next thing you know, me and my seven brothers and sisters and my mother and my stepdad, we are singing in after hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. I mean, we are singing on weekends, every weekend. So our life consisted of go to school, rehearse, sing at night, come home, go to sleep, repeat. And that was our life. And yet we were still struggling. We always struggled. One day on a Saturday, We're rehearsing. Natasha, and this is crazy. The phone ring, right? My mother answers the telephone because the phone rings and she says, hello? Who? And she looks at us and says, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Yes, that Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, who we've been emulating for a long time, soon to be king of pop, is on the phone. She looks at the brother below me, child number 4, and says, he wants to talk to you. So my brother runs over to the phone. Hello? Uh-huh. Okay. And hangs up the phone. Turns around and says, Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. Said he heard I sing and dance just like him. Tells us to keep going. We will get there someday. Jump cut to 1977. We are everywhere. Concerts, magazines, TV shows. Everything we touched that year was turning to gold. Our life of poverty is about to end. I mean, the trajectory of our life was going from here to here now. When Michael Jackson calls and says, keep going and get there someday, what child cannot dream of a better life after that? And here it is, just like he said. 1977, Natasha, is also the same year Motown Records had completed their exhaustive 3-year search to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, who they had lost 3 years earlier to Epic Records. Guess who they chose? My family was the family to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. I tell you, imagine food stamps, government cheese, going days without eating, living amongst rats and roaches my entire life. And now, so Motown chooses us. We are about to sign the largest new artist contract Motown offered any new group. Larger than the Temptations, larger than Smokey Robinson, larger than the Supremes, larger than the Jackson 5 themselves. We were the replacement because everything Michael Jackson could do with his brother, all 8 of my 7 of us, my 7 brothers and sisters that I could do. Sing lead, play instruments, dance, we did it all. So here we are, 5 days away from signing this contract, which is going to be on a Thursday or Friday. I should tell your audience right now, the topic of this conversation is around child sexual abuse. What we are about to discuss, and I'm sure Natasha would agree with me when I say this, can be very triggering for anyone listening or watching. If you need to step back, by all means, do so. Protect yourself. Put a protective bubble around you, whatever you need to do, because it's about to get dark and very gritty. We are, as I said, about to sign the largest new artist contract in 5 days. On a Saturday, my sister screams upstairs, boys, come downstairs, family meeting. We all come running downstairs. This is going to be it. We're about to find out if it's Thursday or if it's Friday. However, earlier that day, my sisters were going in and out of bedrooms, slamming the door, raised voices. You could hear them just going at each other. They were like agitated bees. It was just the buzz. And excuse me, certainly for me and my brothers, that was nothing out of the ordinary because, siblings get into things. The boys get into it with the boys. The girls get into it with the girls. The girls and the boys get into, we're kids and we're very tight. And, that's just part of the lay of the land, just the way it is. So we come downstairs to the family meeting. I'm the last child to enter the room. Natasha, when I enter the room, something is really odd, out of place. My 3 youngest sisters, the 3 youngest of the 8 of us, and the 2 youngest are actually twins, are sitting at the far end of the couch. They're not saying a word. Nothing. Now, to know my 3 sisters, you would know that is weird because all they ever did was talk, laugh, joke, tease. That's all they ever did. But here they are sitting at the far end of the couch, huddled against the armrest together, not saying a word. I look and I'm like, okay, this is not what I'm expecting. This is the wrong energy for this conversation. Also on the couch at the other end are my two youngest brothers. But they're like me. They're wondering what the heck is going on here. They look down at my sisters. They look at me, and I'm like, nah, I don't know. Behind my three youngest sisters, behind the couch is my oldest brother, the oldest of us eight. I lock eyes on him. He's like me. What's what's going on? You know, I'm like, do they not understand? Our life is about to go from here to here. I like to say the bus was outside. The door is open, the engine's running, the seats are warm. All we have to do is step onto the bus and we are gone. Fame, fortune, everything we could imagine is right there. Everything we have dreamt about, Michael Jackson's demand, command, wishes for us are about to come true. But he's confused too. As I entered the living room, the archway, my oldest sister's pacing back and forth, not necessarily blocking it, but she's pissed. She's mad. That wasn't all that odd either, Natasha, because she and my mother could be at it from time to time. In fact, my mother would join my sisters in the morning in some of these conversations. So I'm figuring she and my mom had a blowout. Something's wrong. Okay. But hey, it's the girls. All right. They doing what they do. So I go sit on the couch between my three youngest sisters and my two youngest brothers, and I wait. But as I said, my oldest sister, she is so mad. Within seconds of me sitting down, my mother and stepfather enter the living room. Now, my stepfather's 6'6", 250 pounds, and he wore this huge afro wig that put his height over 7 feet tall. He was a mountain of a man. He had massive hands. Everything about him was big. We have this brown recliner that's in the middle of the living room that clashes violently against the green carpet. I mean, you know, us getting furniture meant going out into the streets looking for furniture. That's how we got mattresses. That's how we got refrigerator. That's how we got chairs, dining room. We had to go into the streets to get it because we couldn't afford it. But as I said, he goes and he sits down in the brown recliner. And he immediately does this. What the hell? No, that's not what I'm expecting. He puts his face in his hands and hides his face. Huh. My brothers and I, we don't have a clue. My mother walks in the living room behind him, and she's usually very bubbly, very effervescent, very full of energy like her children. We are all so energetic like her. But her face is, okay. She walks through the living room and stands next to the large plate glass window that overlooks outside. And she turns around and looks at her children. She's stoic. There's no emotion coming from her. Nothing. She then looks at my oldest sister, who's still going back and forth. And she's looking daggers at my oldest sister. My oldest sister is number three of the eight of us. They don't say a word to each other, but the anger is palpable. It is coming off both of them. My mother then looks at the couch and scans the remaining seven of us and just, my brothers and I are about to hear the words no brother ever expects to hear, the words no brother could ever prepare for. You just can't prepare for this. Now, let me back up just a second. In life, there are earthquakes, and certainly in Los Angeles, we have a lot of them. In fact, just last week, we had three or four. It's commonplace. Material earthquakes, they break freeways, they destroy homes, they uproot trees, and all that sort of stuff. We all know that. We've all seen it. And those things can be put back together, those kind of earthquakes, even the emotion that accompanies the shaking, you eventually settle down. And those things are freeways, that's just rebar, that's just concrete, that's just hammer and nails, that's just spit, that's just dumb, pop, 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 all back together. Get busy, get back to work, living your life. But emotional earthquakes, that's something different entirely. You don't come back from those fully. What we learn to do is accept them. We learn to somehow embrace them. We learn to put them in a place so we can manage our emotions behind them. We can regulate our emotions. My brothers and I are about to be hit with not one, not two, but three emotional earthquakes. Earthquake number one, my mother finally takes a deep breath and she speaks. She says, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. I'm a brother. I have just been hit with news I was not expecting. I am stunned. I begin dropping emotionally. I had no idea what it was at the time, but I am in the throes of PTSD right now. So are my other three brothers. We are dropping. I don't know what she just said. Wait a minute, wait a minute. What did you say? No, 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 not us, not us, not us, not our family. We are the perfect family. We're the family everyone in the neighborhood wants to be a part of. We're the family that everyone wants to hang out with. What are you saying? I am dropping emotionally. I am slow on the uptake because my mother is still talking, and all I catch, Natasha, is liquor store, park, apartment. That's all I remember her saying about that. I my comprehension is just not matching up with what I believed we were about to be talking about. Then my mother drops earthquake number two. Now our house is already breaking. You know, figuratively, it is already cracking. And those are the cracks of my family falling apart. My mother then says, I have known all along. You've known what all along? You have known this has been going on all along? My brothers and I are so blindsided. The shock and disbelief is engulfing us. We don't know what to do. We are so stunned at this time. I'm about 16, 17, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. Adults, when they hear this information that your sister or your child has been sexually abused, don't know what to do. We are so paralyzed by fear and confusion, and we are hearing so many things and going through so many so many different scenarios. How could I not know the guilt, the shame, the anger? It is impossible to figure out the proper way to react. And so my brothers and I are falling. Now, I did notice my sisters weren't reacting, certainly not like me and my brothers. And of course they weren't, because they had already been experiencing this for years. Their emotional health, their emotional ability to handle this is in a very different place because they are in survival mode and have been for years. It turns out all this started the year Michael Jackson called our house in 1970. It's been going on for 6 years already.
I have a quick request. If you're enjoying this content, then please subscribe. It helps our channel to grow, which will bring more people with inspirational stories just like this one, which in turn will reach more people like you. Thank you. Now let's get back to the interview.
For me as a brother, how could I not know? How's this even happening? What, who are we right now? I said there were 3 earthquakes. You've heard the first 2. Earthquake number 3 for me and my brothers, as bad as the first 2 were, are the most devastating, or is the most devastating. Because my oldest sister, and as I said, all this took place within 10 minutes. My oldest sister, out of the blue, turns around and points a finger at her brothers and says, "You can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever." And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so tight lay on the living room floor, broken, destroyed. As I said, my sisters had already begun to figure out how to handle it emotionally for themselves. And as I said, it was out of survival. And obviously there's guilt and there's some blame and there's anger and there's betrayal. And so they've been able to somehow, even at their young age, figure out a way to live life day to day and make it seem normal. Because as far as my 3 brothers and I were concerned, nothing was different. They had acted the same every day that we've known them, except what we just heard explained a few things. Because we could watch TV, we could hear a song, or we could be playing and we could say something to them, and their reaction did not match up with what we were watching or playing or talking about. It just didn't make any sense. And so that's because whatever we said or whatever they were doing, they were being triggered emotionally. They were having flashbacks. They were having so many things all of a sudden hit them. So you're a brother, and you're now told you can't talk about it because my oldest sister says it didn't happen to us, but it did. It was happening to us all along. We just didn't know about it. Natasha, it took me a long time to understand and come to grips with what my oldest sister said. And what she was doing was she was protecting herself. She was protecting her little sisters. She was making sure that they were protected. But the reason why we were having this conversation is because she, my oldest sister, had demanded that morning, which is what the conversations were earlier that day, that we tell the boys today. The boys will know now, before we sign this contract. They need to know what has been going on. So my brothers and I, here we are. Our best friends, 4 of our best friends have just told us we want nothing to do with you. Your feelings don't matter. What you want to talk about doesn't matter. You don't matter. And yet these are the people who could help us understand more than anyone, but they're younger than me. We are children, and we're trying to figure this out, which is impossible. So when you are a brother, the question becomes, and what my mission is, bringing voice to brothers, elevating the voice of brothers in the child sexual abuse space, because no one ever asks us, are you okay? Do you need to talk? Is there anything you need? We and our emotions are packaged, tied with a bow, put in a closet on a shelf, and tucked away, never to be heard from again. And yet, our emotions are under attack, and we are asked to put them away. So the question becomes, what about brothers? Because in 1977, you could go to a library. Every now and then you'd see a movie or a documentary about a woman being sexually abused. And every once in a while, you get about a young girl. And so there was not only conversation, but you could also find book. You could also find some support material for them in 1977. But for boys, no, there were no documentaries, there were no movies, there were no interviews on Oprah or Ellen. There were no books, there were no articles being written about the trauma brothers experience. My book is the very first one of its kind, because what we certainly learned about, and I know, here in the United States, there are some 44 million adults walking around who have suffered child sexual abuse directly. And obviously, if it happens in your family, members of your family are also suffering, but the members of the family rarely, if ever, have any attention brought to their trauma. Oftentimes, when I speak in groups or at events, there's always this one woman who will stand up and say, your sister was right. You boys can't talk about it because it didn't happen to you. And my response is simply this: well, it did happen to us. It happened to us differently. We are collateral damage. However, 6 years before my sisters were sexually abused in 1977, my oldest brother and I were sexually abused by our babysitter almost daily for 6 months. So I do understand what it means to be the direct victim. And in that moment, that's when the woman who decided to asking the questions, demanding or saying statement wise, you cannot talk about it. It's like, oh, you do understand. And I shouldn't have to say that, because trauma is trauma, and there shouldn't be a scorecard kept, except because of what men have done to women historically over sexual abuse. Yeah, there is a scorecard. And yes, there needs to be a scorecard. And so I understand what my sister was doing, like I say, years later, because ultimately what she was doing was simply this: what's between my brothers and I, what's between our legs, are exactly the same thing that's between my stepfather's legs. And so for her, the feeling was we were just as guilty as him, even though her brothers are innocent. So how do we bring brothers' conversation forward? How do we elevate it? How do we get to a point when everyone else is talking about sexual abuse and that momentary exhale takes place? Brothers step into the gap and say, hold on, there's a group that is whose needs are not being addressed. Our trauma is real. We need to also have tools and systems created for us, because the men that we ultimately grow to become will be, and how we treat women and girls will be directly impacted by the support we do or do not get. And as anyone who has done any kind of work in this area, the trauma can be so overwhelming, especially for our men who we're not accustomed to talking about our feelings, and we do a bad enough job of keeping everything in. And, women are so much better at expressing their emotions. Men, we're constantly, I'm King Kong, I gotta go do this, blah, 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 blah. Luckily today we're seeing less and less of that. We're seeing more and more men willing to step out of that dungeon and say, this is who I am, this is what I've gone through, because my story may be able to help others. Um, I just decided that my family story will not end on that dunghill of so many family stories across the history of man, and no one ever hear from them. Our story, Natasha, for me, does not need to end in tragedy. It will be used as something good. Now, I'm sure you have questions, and it took me a long time to get to my sisters, but we can go wherever you want to go with this. So
Yeah.
that's who I am, and that's what I do. I need to elevate the voices of brothers so we can be part of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's a lot to deal with. Um, and I agree with you. I think that it's not, there's no single victim, if you want to call it victim. Like everybody gets affected. There is no, it's a system, it's a family dynamic that gets affected. So it's not just the fact that you've got to keep quiet, your safety is ruined because you can't, the only person who could have taken care of you was your mother. And she knew all along. And so then where do you turn to? Because your older sister's saying to you that she's not available. So my question is, what happened to your stepfather?
In the immediate aftermath of learning what just happened, what my mother and stepfather did, I learned later why they were the last ones to come into the room. They had planned their exit. So as soon as everything came out, within seconds, my stepfather grabbed his chest and started saying his heart, my heart, my heart. And my mom then said, oh, he's having a heart attack. I need to get him to the hospital. She immediately gets him upstairs, and within minutes, they are out the front door. My sisters and brothers and I have no chance to ask any questions or do anything. And I'm sure the reason for that is because they did not want me and my brothers to all of a sudden start putting pieces together and have this emotion of anger and rage start to overtake us. Because together were very capable of taking him down and possibly out, which becomes an even greater challenge for us emotionally. But as time went by, we continued, we obviously did not do the contract with Motown. We lost that over this. And it makes sense, and I know what my sister was doing on that part of it as well. She couldn't see us singing, continue singing and being a family and representing all of this goodness, if you will, and knowing that all this darkness is what we were actually covered in. And I can just imagine now a VH1 behind the music story or MTV story about us, and it's played every week, every year, and which means we never escape that trauma. So we are dealing with it. Me and my brothers and siblings and my remaining siblings, we after about 5 or 10 minutes of no one speaking, we go to our room. And I remember that being the longest walk because I knew going to my bedroom, nothing but darkness and unanswered questions awaited me. And it was kind of a feeling like this maelstrom just swirling around in the ocean, right? And you could just see this white shark just waiting to swallow me. And as I went into the bedroom, that's exactly what happened. All of my fear and anxiety and confusion and my immediate emotional crisis just swallowed me up. And for the longest time, we did not speak, me and my sisters and brothers, because no one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. You had mentioned, my parents, these are the people that you would typically go to because your parents, when you're a child, they are your superheroes. They are the most important people you know. And obviously, when you are born, there's all the promises. I will protect you forever. I will never let harm come to you. I will never let anyone hurt you. But it's very different when they are the ones doing it. And so even though we talked to aunts and uncles later, their response was, I'm not going to get involved. So there's betrayal there. For them, it was a matter of, if you guys get rich, we want to be able to participate in that, in the benefits of that. And so they just stayed aside. We spoke to aunts, uncles, grandparents, and they wanted nothing to do with it. Some of it from my grandparents was a matter of a generational thing, I believe. They just did not get involved. That's just what they did. But we went through so much depression and isolation with this. My brothers and I, um, we did not talk about this for decades because my sister had said, you can't talk about it. Now, my sisters continued to talk about it because we could hear them talking about it from time to time, but my brothers were never invited into the conversation. And what my sister saying, you can't talk about it ever, we took that literally. We did not talk about it for almost 50 years. I'm 65. I'll be 66 in a couple of months. And so I'm carrying all this trauma. I'm carrying all of this. And there were times when my mother would continue to see my stepdad. In fact, a couple of times she brought him back to the house. And as kids, you're like, what is going on? The betrayal is so complete. The betrayal is so big because some of us decided, oh, okay, since we're not going to do the contract thing, we still have to eat. At the time before we signed a contract with Motown, with the anticipated contract, we were with United Artists Records. And we owed them $250,000 for an album that we had completed in '77 that we reached the coveted Billboard's top 100, not twice, but three times that year. And so we owed them, and they were the ones paying for our house. They were the ones paying for our car. They were the ones paying for our food. So we had to keep going. And so some of us kept going because that was our only means of support. And it was very, very difficult because we would be around our sisters. And as you can imagine, Natasha, we would hear the whispers every now and then. How come you didn't hear anything? How come you didn't see my tears? Well, the goal was to make sure we did not. And they were very effective in doing so. And my stepfather was very effective, and my mother was very effective, pressuring them not to make sure the boys didn't know, to make sure that if you did say something, I'm going to hurt you. If I don't hurt you, I'm going to hurt your brothers. If I don't hurt your brothers, I'm going to hurt your mother. They heard all that. So that kept them locked in place, as is often the case with sexual abuse victims, be they children or adults. If you say something and you're a woman and you've been sexually abused, if you say, I'm going to hurt your children, I'm going to make sure the government takes them away from you because you're a bad parent, you're a bad mother. All of these things you're trying to somehow figure out and navigate, while at the same time, emotionally, psychologically, you are under attack constantly. So as I said, I understand what my sister was doing, but for me and my brothers, where do we go? Because in 1977, as I said, there were no tools. Women controlled the narrative back then as they do today. Because historically, as my brother said, and I completely agree, my oldest brother, he said, if you're a man, you should just assume that every woman that you know and come in contact with, just assume it. Don't even think about it. Just assume it. Just assume today that they have been sexually abused in some way and go from there with them, because that brings tolerance and understanding and compassion. And I happen to agree. That's just how I approach every woman. I just assume something has happened to them. And even unfortunately, because of my sister's experience, every little girl, someone has said something to them. Someone has made some sort of comment or looked at them in a way that they shouldn't. And I just assume it. So you, as a brother and as family, just to get back to that, we are all trying to deal with it in a very different way because we are distinctly 8 different people with 8 different personalities and 8 different relationships, each having a different relationship with our mother, each having a different relationship with our stepdad. And all of a sudden, we find out that everything we thought our family was, we discover it is all, well, not all of it has been alive, but the majority of it has been alive. And I say not all of it because I think it's important that people understand. Oftentimes, we are confronted with, well, should I do this or was it really as bad? And I think the question at the end of the day becomes, well, is it does the bad outweigh the good? 50-50, 60-40 good, 70% good, 30% bad, 80-20, 90-10, 99-1. And I think it depends on the 1%. If the 1% was so heinous and 1% is so bad, it can overpower all the good. And that's what it did to us. That 1% that of knowing what just happened destroyed everything. So from a brother's perspective, you want to have this protective instinct. You want to do something and you realize you can't. And the guilt and the shame and the stigma of not knowing engulfs you, it overpowers you because you look at your little sisters and me as a brother who believes that the greatest, what it means to be a brother is to protect the honor of your sisters. That's what it means to be a brother to sisters, to girls, is to protect their honor. And I couldn't. And now my self-esteem is taking a hit, my self-worth is taking a hit, and I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling the stigma of I don't want anyone to know, just like my sisters, they don't want anyone to know. You ask anyone who's been sexually abused, they don't want anyone to know. Women, men, they don't want anyone to know. Because what we're going to get is a bunch of, girl, I would have done this if that was me. Dude, I would have done this. And my response to that is, that's all noise. Because you don't know what you're going to do until you're in the middle of it. And so with us, what made it even doubly worse is that we're on the cusp of fame. We are incredibly popular in Los Angeles, and as I said, so many of our friends and fans and stuff, they wanted to be a part of us. And now to know this is really not what we are about, but so much of what we are about is wrapped in this cocoon of darkness. So how do we bring brothers into the conversation so that they can have a conversation with their sisters and their sisters feel safe enough that they can have this conversation? Because brothers need to be able to express. We need to be able to find some sort of help. Because all across the United States and certainly in many places around the world, you have a 12-step program for everything. You have a 12-step program for alcohol. You have a 12-step program for substance abuse. You have a 12-step program for pornography. You have a 12-step program on how to get you back to college, how to get you focused, how to get you here, how to get you there. But for brothers, there's not even a one-step program. There is nothing. I was talking to a psychologist this morning, and she said, I have never heard of anything like this. She says, you're right. There are so many things out there for women, but there's nothing for men.
Yeah. Do um
I know
I
this is
wouldn't
a
even
lot.
say I wouldn't even say it's
This
survivor
is a lot.
guilt, but because you feel helpless. That's what you called your book. It's the
Yeah.
helplessness, because you're unable to stop it. You weren't aware that it happened. It's already done, and your hands are tied. You can't speak about it. Nobody's admitting, and the people that have done wrong are just carrying on, and nothing gets done to them. And then you get people telling you it's not so bad.
Well,
So
I will say this. There are things, as I said, this is all in the book. My brothers and I did as our sister said, because my mother brought my stepdad back into the house, and she would surround us with him because we needed to remain as a family in order to make money. And so it took me 9 years before I did anything because my mother kept saying, I will handle it. And you're caught in this thing, or certainly I was with my sisters, you can't talk about it, don't do anything. And my mother saying, I will handle it. And that's part of the challenge for brothers is if the people who you look up to say they're going to handle it, you say okay. But I have to say this about that. My mother saying she was going to handle it was like a warm blanket. It meant I didn't have to do anything. But I knew all along there was this betrayal of my sisters. But my older sister said, don't talk about it, don't do anything, just stay away. And I didn't have to do anything. But I'm feeling this trauma every day. I have to say something, but I have nowhere to go. So it wasn't until 3 months before I was to get married that I actually decided to do something. And the it was just getting to be too much. I did not talk to my sisters about it. And it took 9 years for me to do something. It was 3 months before I was to get married. The realization that I wasn't going to be around to protect my sisters, or at least, you know, in physicalness, in a physical form, be around that so that I could try to do my best to make sure they were okay. Just the the, the realization I wasn't going to be around Natasha was just weighing me down. 3 months before I was to get married, it had gotten to the point to where I had stopped eating. I started losing weight. So one day, just 3 months before, as I'm talking about it, I'm talking to my fiance, my wife, who I've now been married to 38 years. I told her, I said, I've got to go to my mom's house. I've got to do something. And she could hear in my voice something was not right. And she said, is everything okay? My response was, yeah, yeah, it's fine. She said, is there anything I could do? Do you want me to come with you? And I said, no, 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 no. She said, well, I see you tonight. And I said, I hope so. And then she said, what does that mean? I said, oh, no, I will be fine. So I gave her a kiss goodbye and I drove over to where the family was still staying. Now, my mother kept my bedroom there. And I had decided, because brothers, we can go to this very dark place, our protective instincts and our inability to deal with our emotional trauma can take us to a very, very dark place. There's a lot of talk these days about mental health this, mental health that, and that explains a lot for a lot of people. I am not one of those people. It does not explain a lot. In fact, for me, it explains very little. What explains a lot is emotional health, which is why my book is about the emotional health challenge. See, mental health is logic thinking. It is says you're alone, you're in isolation. Let me write you a prescription. Go see a therapist. It's all your problem. Go over there. We're going to keep going. It's all by yourself. No, emotional health is what comes before the mental health. The emotional trauma always comes first because emotional health speaks of feelings, it speaks of shared experience, it speaks of community involvement. But how often does the community want to be involved? It's easier to say that person has a mental health problem, that's just them. But what happens is, and I'm really, curious to what you think about this, When your emotional challenges cannot be supported or some sort of assistance is brought to help you, even after you express that you're dealing with a trauma, when you can't have those needs met, there's only one other place to go, and that's in your head. Then it becomes a mental health problem. There's always the emotional support, always emotional trauma that comes first that no one wants to talk about or deal with because it's difficult to write a prescription for that. It's difficult to say, I need to talk to you. I need emotional support. I need to bring some other people, family, friends I need to talk to who I can just share because no one wants to get into that conversation. But that is where the conversation must take place. Because if we can deal with the emotional stress that people are dealing with, chances are there's less mental health challenges. So for me, because I was not allowed to talk, because I was not allowed to share what I was experiencing 3 months before my wedding, I had decided my life was forfeit. My life was done because I was going to kill my stepfather in order to protect my sisters. Now imagine that. I'm going to kill the guy who has been molesting them, thinking that my sisters were going to be okay. They were going to be far from okay. They were going to be worse because their natural reaction is going to be, I should not have said anything. He would still be here. I should not have said anything. My brothers would be okay. And that's these little girls, because you started on my sisters when they were 5 and 6 years old. My oldest sister was 11. They had a better handle on this than I did because unfortunately they had been dealing with it a lot longer. So here I am thinking I'm going to kill him. And so this is what I was off to do when I told my fiance, as I said, my wife of 38 years today. I left the apartment and I went downstairs and I hopped in my little orange Fiat X19 and I went to my mother's house. I went upstairs to the room that was my bedroom. Now there are two bedrooms upstairs. They're separated by about 30 feet of hallway. There's my bedroom at the top of the stairs, right at the landing. And you go down the hall, my mother, who had brought my stepfather back in, which is the reason why I figured I got to handle this. They're 30 feet down the hall. I go into my bedroom and I am in a mental health situation now. I'm alone. I'm in my head. I am imagining everything he has done to my sisters. In fact, my sisters who read my book said, you got it right. Everything you thought, you imagined, and the way you wrote, bringing us into a closet, closing the door, unzipping his pants, blah, 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 bringing us into the bedroom, taking us to this apartment, taking us to the park, doing this, to the liquor store, getting us drunk, doing this. You got it right. Even though we didn't tell you, you got it right. You imagined it exactly as it was. I couldn't have written it better myself. I'm like, wow. So I'm imagining this as I'm in my bedroom for 2 hours. I'm pacing back and forth. It's in the evening. It's in Los Angeles. It's a cool summer night. I open the windows. The breeze is coming in, but I am drenched in sweat. I am mentally in a horrific place, but I'm a brother who's about to handle it, who's about to step up and do what a brother's supposed to do. So I would lie on the bed and I would get up and pace back and forth and I'm sweating and I'd lie on the bed. Okay, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And then I'd go to, he's so much bigger than you because I'm 5'8" at this time. I'm 145 pounds dripping wet. He outweighs me by over 100 pounds. And I'm just imagining what he is about to do to me. But then I imagine my sisters, he did this to her. He took her here. He bought her this. He took her over to his brother's house. his brother's apartment and he did this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, you got this, you got this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And I muster up all this courage. And then he's so much bigger than me. And this fear just back and forth for 2 hours. I'm waiting for a sound to take me out of my misery. I'm waiting for the sound of my mother's bedroom door opening. I am there to kill him. I have the instrument of his death leaning against the door jamb. It is my favorite baseball bat. I hit many home runs with that baseball bat. But tonight, I'm going to hit the greatest home run of my life. It is the one that will answer every question of why I did not do something earlier. I'm about to hit that home run. So Natasha, I'm lying on the bed and I'm sweating like I said. I am so nervous. I'm so scared. But my life, I'm either about to go to jail for murder or he's about to kill me, and I am good with it. I am good with it because I'm finally going to step up and do the thing their brother should have done. So I hear it, breathe, and I look up. Their bedroom door just opened. I get off the bed, I place my feet on the floor, take a deep breath. This is it. I stand up and I go to the door, put my hand on the door handle, crack the door, and I look down the hallway. And there he is, coming out of my mother's bedroom. Okay, showtime. Now our hallway it's upstairs. There's a short 3.5 foot wall that overlooks the stairwell. And because I've already planned this out, I know where I need to be when I confront him. I can be anywhere in that hall except with my back to the short wall that overlooks the stairwell. Because all this mountain of a man has to do is just push me in the chest and I go tumbling down. Hit the bottom of the stairs, neck snaps, I'm dead. I can't be there. Okay, that's the plan. Just do not be there. I step out of my bedroom, but I leave my bat in the bedroom. I don't want to agitate the situation just yet. So he starts coming down the hallway and we start to get closer and closer together. And he looks at me and he says, hey, hiya. But then he stops. And he can see the look on my face and comprehension is dawning over his face. Something is wrong. We get closer and closer and I can just see him getting taller. He's got his wig, so he's over 7 feet tall. I'm 5'8", and I don't say a word. But we get closer and closer and closer until we are chest to chest, or in my case, face to chest, because I am not tall enough to look over his shoulder. He's that much bigger than me. In fact, it kind of blocks out all the light in the hall. We had this one light in the hall, and it was just dark. And I am literally right here. And I look up the side of this mountain, and this mountain is looking down at me. He towers over me, and I said, oh my God. But I realized my back is to the short wall, the one place I am not supposed to be. In that instance, I figured I have got to switch positions really quick. So I take a step to my left, forcing him from his right to go to his left, and I'm now where I want to be. Luckily, he moved. He did not have to move, but fortunately, he did. We're still face to chest. And I look up the side of this mountain and I say, you have 24 hours to leave this house. If you are still here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead because I will have killed you. I'm a brother in pain. I'm a brother ready to commit murder because I could not get the help I needed. And this was my only outlet. There was no other place for me to go. He looks down at me and he doesn't say a word. It's the first time he's never said a word. First time he's been speechless. You've just been threatened and you have nothing to say. I turn around and I walk back to the bedroom and I close my door. Waiting, I grab the bat and I step to the middle of the bedroom. I'm ready. I hear footsteps. Okay, I'm shaking but I'm ready. He's coming through the door. But the footsteps start to fade. He's walking back the other direction to my mom's bedroom. And I hear the door close. I grab the bat. I walk downstairs and I go to the Fiat, get in it, go back to my fiance's place. And she says, you're back already. I said, yes. Is everything okay? And I said, I think so. I will know tomorrow. What does that mean? I have to go back to the house. So the next day, get back in the car, go to the house. I have my bat. And as I'm walking up the walkway, I decide I'm going to leave the bat outside. I'm not going to bring it in the house because once again, I don't want to agitate a situation that's already getting out of hand. But I'm not thinking straight. I am just a brother intent on finding revenge and retribution for his sisters. As I said, was already okay with my life being dead because either he's going to kill me or in California, we premeditated murder. Murder one. I am dead either way. I opened the door, fully expecting him to be standing there with a silver 38 pointing at my face as I entered. But he's not standing there. You see, trauma to me is like DNA. DNA throughout our body, it just does what it does. It replicates all the time, oftentimes in ways we don't know anything about. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it is constantly replicating. That's what DNA does. It's constantly remaking us. Trauma does the same thing. It can replicate in ways we know nothing about. And my trauma had replicated in a way that was taking me to commit murder, to kill somebody, because I did not, once again, get the emotional support. I still can't talk to my sisters. I'm still not even talking to them about this, but I'm handling this because of my wedding. Not going to happen. There is no stepdad pointing a gun at my face. I walk to the living room, it's quiet. I walk through the dining room, it's quiet. I walk through the kitchen, it's quiet. But I hear a sound at the back of the room. Now we have a makeshift studio at the back of the house in this bedroom. And I walk back there. My youngest brother is back there working on some music. And I said to him, is he here? And he said, no, he left last night. And he has not been back. I'm like, he's gone. I did it. I did it. Got him out of the house. Except I'm about to commit the worst thing I could do for my sister. I'm about to, on my wedding, I'm about to have the greatest regret of my life. See, I want to somehow have a relationship with my mother. your children, no matter what your parents do, oftentimes you go into the Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, and you want to try to create something nice. Because I know I'm going to have kids, I want my kids to know their grandparents because I know my biological dad beat the crap out of my mom growing up. In fact, we ran from him from Portland in the middle of the afternoon without him knowing about it, and we ended up in Los Angeles, and we never saw him again. Alcoholic, drug abuser, womanizer, wannabe pimp. That's who he was. And I saw how we had no relationship with our grandparents after that. And I did not want my son, who was eventually who we were going to have, but my children to not know their grandmother. So I had not been speaking to my mom, but my wife, soon to be wife, and we were talking about it. I said, I want to try to have some kind of relationship with her because I think it could be healing for the family. We could get to the conversation we never had. And she agreed. So I went and I spoke to my mom about the upcoming wedding. And I offered an olive branch. As I said, we had not been talking. I said, so the wedding is coming up. And understand, I do not want him there. Neither one of us want him there. I'm making this very, very clear. She says, okay. So my olive branch is this. If you want to invite him, you can, but know that we do not want him there. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I've made a gesture. She's going to do the right thing. And we can go from there. She says, give me a couple of days and I'll get back to you. And in that moment, I knew what I had done. I knew what she was going to do because my mom is all about image. She's all about how people see her. She's all about, I need people to see that our family is strong because we've got her family coming and we've got other people in the music industry coming, and I don't want them to see us without him. She brought him to the wedding, and I try to keep to my word if I say I'm going to do something. But this was the one time I should not have done it. The brother who got rid of him brought him back in the family, put him in front of my sisters for the wedding. And that broke us apart even more. So, in trying to make things okay, I made things worse. And so, when you are trying to heal from your trauma, there are so many different things you can try to do, but without the help of other people, having conversation, helping balance out what you're going through, oftentimes you can make things worse. And that's what I did. And but I got my retribution from my sisters 40 years later. Um, Part of the challenge for brothers is we're not invited to the conversation, but we're expected to answer for our non-participation. And to me, those two things cannot exist in the same space, and yet they do. Because if you can't talk about it, how can you be responsible for something you did not know? And that's what my sisters were holding against us. And so, how do we bring brothers into a conversation in such a way that they can not only heal their pain, but also reconnect with our sisters and help our sisters? Because through conversations together, that is where the healing can take place. But it's important that sisters not confuse a brother's silence for them not caring. It's just that we do not know how to approach you because oftentimes you keep us at bay. As my older sister, you can't talk about it. Do not never bring it up. But we need to bring it up. We need to be able to have the space, and we need to be able to have the ability and the tools to help us deal with it. So how do we do this? And this is what I look to do, is create this conversation so that brothers and men can be a lot better at sharing what's going on. I know that was a lot, but
Yeah. Well, it's been years, right? So, and I see it a lot because I work with women who are in narcissistic relationships, and I understand how often the woman will side with the man because she needs some sort of safety need met.
yeah,
So, at the cost of not being a parent, the cost of not being there. Yeah. So, I find it interesting that just before you signed the Motown deal, you had this earthquake. And then just before your wedding, you decide you're going to completely disrupt your life again.
yeah,
It's like these major decisions, and it's almost like a pattern you're going to repeat. And I'm very glad you didn't do that because you wouldn't be
yeah,
sitting here, and it's not useful. And I think the thing is, like a lot of people group um, what happened to your sisters. That had nothing really to do with you, but your emotional state is to the fact that you're being betrayed. Your mother isn't standing up and being the protector, that she's not doing the right thing. And so that's what you need to deal with. So you have your own set of traumas. It's a different kind of trauma, but it's still a trauma. And yeah, so what is the book cover then in that case? I'm assuming that helplessness to hopeless to being hopeful is what that would cover, is the ability to let go of the trauma, or maybe
yes. I
integrate it
was,
somehow.
yeah. In the book, I talk about how my second sister made it okay. And in 2013, I was just, as I said, thinking, I do not want our tragedy to end this way. I want it to be useful. So I decided, I have to write a book from my brother's perspective. So sisters and men who are dealing with this, first of all, men knowing that they're not alone and that they're keeping all of this in, that there are other men going through the same sort of trauma who want to speak to their sisters, but also to let sisters know this is what your brothers are going through. So I decided I wanted to write a book about it. And there was a conference coming up in San Diego put on by the motivational speaker, Lisa Nichols, on how to write a book in like 20 minutes. You just put the chapters in and then you fill in the rest of the stuff later. And I know that I want to write this book, but I know I have to tell my sisters this is coming because I don't want them to be blindsided. I did not want to have them have to deal with people reading it and then coming to them and their response would be, "What are you talking about? I knew nothing about this." So I decided to call my second sister and I said, "Look, I want to write a book. I want to come and talk to you about it." And she says, "Okay, come over to my house," which I did. And we were standing out in front of her garage. And I said to her, "I want to write a book about what brothers go through after learning about our sisters because we were never able to talk about it. We were never able to just have any conversations. In fact, we still haven't. I haven't spoken to my brother about it, any of my three brothers." And she says something I was not expecting. You see, time has a way of helping everyone grow. Time can either lionize or it can make your situation worse. And so, not knowing what my sister was going to say, I said, "I want to write a book," but I was just ready for the anger to come my way. "How dare you? What are you talking about? You're not supposed to talk about this. It didn't happen to you." I could just hear her echoing her oldest sister. But my second sister said something that I was not expecting. She said, "Of course you should write about it." It's not my story. It's not a girl's story. It's you boys' story. In fact, all of you boys should write a book. And I'm thinking, what are you saying? You guys said we could not talk about it, and now you're saying it's okay to write a book. But she showed me grace and love. She showed me understanding. She showed me passion. She showed me compassion. She showed me tolerance. She showed me all the things that I had been deprived for 40 years. But it was because I was willing to step out of my comfort zone and talk to her, knowing that I'm probably going to get blasted. Rage is coming my way. And I think that's the first lesson to healing is, first of all, understanding that and embracing that we have a situation. Because without understanding and embracing it, there's very little chance of healing, if at all. You have to just accept it. It is what it is. And I'm a man, and I just had to accept that I failed here. This happened. I had to go through all of it. And once I accepted it, then the next step was, if I'm going to be able to heal myself in any way, even though there are no tools, it's going to require that I talk to somebody. Most importantly, it's going to be required that I speak to my sisters and let them say whatever they need to say to me, and not have any pushback and not offer any excuses. Just let them say what they need to say. Because I know whatever I say is going to be the wrong thing, most likely. Even if it's meant to be nice, they need to say what they need to say. So I went over to her expecting her to just come at me with all this rage. But that's not what I got. I got all this love and understanding. And as we're talking, as I said, we're in front of the garage, and I'm in tears. I'm emotionally broken in a different way. Not I'm not breaking from anger. I'm just breaking from all this expected love coming my way. And I'm a mess. I didn't know what to do with it. And she's hugging me, and I'm like, no, 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 you're doing the wrong thing. So she freed me from all the shackles of trauma and pain that I had. They just melted away. I called one of my twin sisters, and her reaction was the same way. We hadn't seen each other for 20 years, and I went to her apartment to tell her what I wanted to do. She opened the door, and it was nothing but hugs. I'm like, what are you doing? This is not what I'm expecting. But time can do that. And I think because I was willing to call and say, I want to talk to you. Will you give me a few minutes? I think that did so much. But there was still one other sister I needed to talk to, and that was my oldest sister, who said, you can't talk about it. The hardest call of my life. A few days after speaking to my two other sisters, I picked up the telephone to call my oldest sister, and the phone weighed a ton. I'd pick it up and I set it down. I picked it up and set it down. We had a landline in this particular room, so that's why I'm not on a cell phone. For those who are saying, where'd you pick up and set down? No, we had a landline. It was so heavy. I was so scared. Every excuse I could think of came to mind. I can't talk to her. I need to go wash dishes. I can't talk to her right now. I need to fold clothes. I can't talk to her. I need to go outside, watch the paint on the bench dry. That was real important. I had to do that. We're just getting in our way because we know what we have to do. We're afraid to do it. It's like the book from the author Susan Jeffers. We have to feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's so hard, but when you do it, it's so liberating. So I get my oldest sister on the phone, and I said to her, I'm going to write a book from a brother's perspective. I put that out there right away. From a brother's perspective of what happened to our family, so other brothers know, because I think our family story can help other brothers and sisters understand. so they can talk. And when I told her, she was silent for a couple of minutes. Natasha, it went on forever. It just went on forever. And I could just feel the volcano percolating and the lava just bubbling up toward the top and just ready to go, certainly from her. After a couple of minutes, she just said, okay, what do you mean, okay? What are you talking about? What do you mean, okay? I said, you said we can't talk about it for years, and we have not even talked about it amongst ourselves. Your brothers don't talk to each other about it. And your response is okay? He said, yeah. I said, okay. I spoke to these two other sisters, and I told them what I want to be able to do is I'm just not going to tell a brother the story from a brother's perspective, but I think it would be incredibly valuable if you girls contributed a section to the book because it would give sisters and women an opportunity to hear from you guys, those who have experienced what you're experiencing, but can live through you. The two others said, yes, they're going to do it. But I thought I would make you the offer anyway, even though I know you're going to say no. And she said, no, I'll do it. What do you mean, no? You'll even contribute to the book. So these three sisters contribute to the book. Two of my brothers. So you get a full family view of what it's like. But it is a brother's story. And so I go to the Lisa Nichols thing, and this is when I realized there are two things that point out just how big this really is. I went to the Lisa Nichols thing, and I got up to talk about what I want to write about. And I went back to my seat, and within seconds, I was swarmed by women giving me notes, saying, keep going. But most of what I heard was this: I wish I had spoken to my brother. I should have told him I had no idea this is what he has been going through. This is the burdens that he's been carrying. This is what could help him. It got to be too much. So I got up and I went out of the hall, closed the double doors behind me, and in seconds they burst open. More women came out and surrounded me, and I was completely lost. I was not expecting it. More women saying, I wish I had spoken to my brother. I should have said something. Thank you, thank you, thank you for writing this book, for wanting to write this book. I had no idea until you spoke. This is what they have been carrying. But it was three women who came up to me separately and who did not know each other who said, I should have spoken to my brother. But what they said that left such an impression was those three women said, my brother took his life once he realized what had happened to me because his trauma was so painful. He felt guilty at not being able to protect me, and it got to be too much, and they killed themselves. And so I knew this was not only a story for brothers, but it was also a story for sisters. One of the things that also brings it home for me, my father-in-law passed away 4 years ago. He had a copy of my book and I didn't know it. But 2 years before he passed away, he called me over to the house. Now, my father-in-law, he's white, he's Jewish. He grew up in New York. I grew up in LA. He grew up from a nice middle class family. I grew up from my family. He had a great education. I did not. He had all the things I did not, but we had a great relationship. As far as I'm concerned, my father-in-law, this old white Jewish guy, was my dad. He represented everything a father should be. He calls me to the house and I go over. And when I get there, I immediately notice, Natasha, that my mother-in-law is not there, which was odd because she was always there. I mean, they were inseparable. But at this moment, she wasn't. He's sitting at the dining room table. He says, "Come over here. I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay, Dad." I go over to the table and I sit down. So I said, "Everything okay?" And then I look down and I see what's in front of him. It's my book. Hmm. He pats it and he says, "I want to talk to you about this." Now, I had no idea he had it. "You want to talk to me about my book?" I said, "Yes, I want to talk to you about it." Okay. He then says, "You cannot tell anyone this story until I pass away." Okay. The only person I've ever told this story to is your mother-in-law. Your wife and her sisters do not know this story. Okay. All right. What is he about to tell me? He's 95 years old, 93. What is he about to tell me that's so important about my book? He says, "I want you to know I understand." You understand what? I understand what you're dealing with. When we were little, we lived in a two-story apartment. So he's getting ready to tell me this story. The family upstairs we were incredibly close with. So close that neither family kept their front door locked. We could come in and out of each other's apartments anytime, day or night. That's what we did for years. One day, my mother sends me upstairs to get something. I don't remember what it is, but she sent me upstairs to get something. And so I open the door and walk in, and I don't see anyone. My stepdad's about 15, 16 years old. I don't see anyone. I don't hear anything. So I step further in, and then I hear something coming out of one of the bedrooms. I walk to the bedroom and I open the door, and the father is molesting my oldest sister. I just stood there, shocked. I turned around and went back downstairs, and I did not say a word to anyone. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my father. When my sister came downstairs, I didn't say anything to her. She didn't say anything to me. I didn't say a word. A couple of months later, it happened again, and I didn't say a word. I want you to know I understand what you are going through. I understand your book. I was so caught off guard, Natasha, from this story. He's he's telling me all this and he's in tears. He's 93 years old and he wants to tell not his Jewish white son-in-law or his white son-in-law who's Greek Catholic. He wants to tell me, his black son-in-law, whose life is completely different from his, that I want you to know the burden that I have been carrying for almost 80 years. And I understood in that moment, it makes no difference how old you are as a brother. Your race, your religion, your education, your politics, your wealth, where you grew up, what state, what country, this crosses everything. And for my stepfather to call me and he's saying, I want someone to hear me. I want someone to know. At this age, he still wanted someone to say it's okay for him. He is very well off. He doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. He certainly doesn't need to prove anything to me, but he wanted me to know. And this is pointing out how important it is, no matter how old the individual is, they still want to talk. This is something you are very familiar with, your spiritual warrior journey. This is his journey. And his journey takes him to 93. He's still walking the warrior journey. How do I get to the end of this story? It ended with him telling me. We had a few more years left with him, but our relationship became even better. And I never thought it could be better, but it really became one of father and son in a way that I had never imagined, simply because he took the time to read it and to call me and say, I need to talk. Will you listen? That's that's the power of the healing and wanting to talk, finding the courage to talk. And there's no greater story for me than that story of my father-in-law calling me over, because it really just pointed out, as I said, who you are and what you are about. We're all carrying stuff.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's just a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I know whatever you do to one person does not mean it only affects one person. It affects the collective. And that's, we are all part of the collective. Nothing gets untouched. So at some stage or another, it's going to come back to everybody. So well done to you for speaking out. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's time for actually men to speak up as well, because for too long it's been kept quiet and it's just something that happens. And I think when you keep a secret, it perpetuates the problem. And that it's
Yeah,
actually the secret that causes the pain.
absolutely. You are absolutely correct. We want to talk. I think most people want to step into their space and we want to own our space, but we are so afraid of what that means once other people hear about it. It's that whole stigma of what other people are going to say, that noise that I mentioned earlier. We give greater importance to the noise coming back at us instead of what we need to heal, what we need to move forward.
Yeah.
We're so concerned about what everyone else thinks.
Yeah. And 9 out of 10 times they have experienced the trauma already anyway that they're not speaking about. And it's their
Yeah,
own shame that they're trying to cover up so that you keep quiet. You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
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 And I think that's actually been going on too long and it's time for people to speak out. So
Hmm.
just out of interest, what was the name of your group that you were singing?
The Whitney family. You
Okay.
can find stuff on us all over the internet. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Motown had gone so far as to even create a TV show for us. It was called at Wits End. It was a variety show, and they had created so much stuff for us. They were so ready for us to come. In fact, the woman who discovered the Jackson Five, Suzanne DePass, we were about to be her new discovery for Motown. She was walking us through the door. This is our new
Wow.
group. So just the irony and the connection between us and them, and who was involved and how we our not necessarily lives intertwined, but
Yeah.
as I said, just the connecting points. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what happened had nothing to do with your hard work that you guys put in. It had nothing to do with your talent. It had, that was separate, but yet it impacts on every area of your life.
It impacted on everything, and for me and my brothers, we did not talk about it. It wasn't until 4 years ago, maybe 5 years almost, that I finally had a conversation with my older brother about it. And then a couple of months later, I was able to bring him and one of my twin sisters who contributed to the book, we had a 2 hour conversation that we recorded that's on my website. It's part of a 16-part series. And our conversation, and we learned so much about each other, the assumptions that she had about her brothers and the assumptions that we had about her and our sisters. And ultimately, we learned that we were so much closer than we imagined. It just required a conversation that everyone was afraid to have because of the pain involved. There's going to be a lot of pain there, particularly for me and my older brother. But we felt the fear and we did it anyway. And so
Yeah.
it becomes generational, particularly for men. When we don't handle this, we start to pass down some of the actions that we should have done. We begin to pass them down to our children, and it was just my belief that I'm stopping all of this right here, and I'm just going to do whatever I needed to do it, even in the midst of my guilt and shame, and obviously my betrayals and things that I would have, could have, should have done. But at the end of the day, it was all about how can I take my family's story and use it as something positive. How can I do that? And that just comes from writing Helplessness. And as you said, hopefulness looks at how do you find those people, places, and things in your past that you can keep you tethered to everyone else. Because that, for me, is where you start to find hope. Oftentimes, people will talk about hope being, or the love being the most powerful word. For me, it is not. For me, the most powerful word is hope. Love predisposes that there's hope that you can get it. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't have hope, how can you even imagine love even being possible? You're just in darkness. And so I think you have hope, and hope says, this is real, this is possible for you. Then you can start to build on that and, have loving relationship. Because I also look at when people attack or, try to take something from you, they don't come at you and say, we're going to take love from you. They're going to take your ability to hope for things, your hope for a better life, hope for a better future, hope for a better outcome. That's what they take from you. And that's what my stepfather was doing to my sisters. He was taking a hope from them. We were having hope as children taken from us in some form or another. It wasn't about love, because love always, that can come and go. It's certainly perception of it. And so if you have hope, then you can see your way through a possible healing process for yourself. You can see what you need to do. But if you don't have hope, then life is so difficult. So that's why the next book that I'm writing is called Hopefulness. And eventually, the third book is Happiness. And how do you get to happiness? Happiness is where I'm at now. Does that mean I am not in pain anymore? No. What it means is that I've been able to find a place to put the trauma so that I can move forward. Because I know at the end of the day, men, women, boys or girls, we all want the same thing. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We all want to be understood. And we all want to move forward in our life every day in a positive direction. Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
And to me, hope is about those things. And if you have those things, then your love can be in abundance for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very powerful message. Thank you for that. Because I think, and it ties a lot in with meaning and having purpose. Um, yeah. So where can people get hold of you?
Well, thank you for asking. People can, if they want to contact me directly, they can contact me at keepercw.author@gmail. They can get to me there. They can go to my website, keepercatran.whitney.com, and they can not only get the book there, but there are, as I said, podcasts, there are chapter readings and things like this. If you want to buy the book, obviously, probably the easiest place is Amazon. But I do a lot of talking. I do a lot of events, and it's been a very interesting 4 to 6 months. The thing I'm being asked to speak all over the place now, and I'm finding that so many people want to hear about the challenges that brothers go through because oftentimes it comes down to I never even thought of that. How can I have never even considered what brothers go through? It's because us being part of the conversation is more taboo or an inconvenient truth,
Yeah.
you know. And so those are the best ways to reach me. Again, thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
I'll post all your details in the link in the description below as well.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Um, yeah, I think a lot of men, because they're taught to suppress their feelings, men are meant
Mhm.
to be seen and not heard, but those things, it's time to change that. And you can either stand by and watch the world happen or you can do something about it. So it takes courage, but at the end of the day, it's rewarding.
It is incredibly rewarding, and you may be surprised at the reaction of some people you were so afraid of to talk to, as in the case with me and my sisters.
Yeah,
The reaction can be completely opposite. They're like, why did I say something earlier? Why did I wait 40 years? But
because the
everything
time is
happens
right
for a
now.
reason. Exactly. Right. Exactly. The time is right. I had to go through some things. They needed to go through some things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a great day and
You too. Thanks
chat
for
to you soon.
having me. Bye.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye bye.